No, from
It might change. It might change. It's just Morning, everyone. I think we should begin now. Thank you for joining us, and I know there are many more people joining us through from far away through our live stream videos. Today, we'd like to talk about how to harness the digital technologies, all these emerging new technologies, in our response to the challenges of climate change. And the background of putting together this session was this really is a very challenging and tough question of how to leverage all these new technologies, because technology is developing and it's growing and moving so rapidly that many of the governments, even the governments in more advanced economies, are also struggling very much in terms of how to leverage these new technologies, and bringing this and trying to do this work in emerging and frontier market economies. It's even harder, and it's also another story. And so we wanted to gather various views and expertise to find a maybe the best way to leverage these new sources of new solutions. And so I should kind of introduce our speakers today. I'm Magdalena Saul at Africa Development Bank, currently with the Energy Complex. I will be the moderator for this session. And right next to my immediate right is Mr. Jose Lindo, who is the CEO of Climate Coin and Climate Trade. Right? And right next to him is Mr. Alexis Leroy, who is the CEO and founder of Alco Group. And these two gentlemen has been collaborating and working together very much, right? You have a new product that you've developed together, right? So we'll be able to hear more about that too. And right next to Mr. Alexis is Mr. Faustin, who is the Deputy Director General of Rwanda Environmental Management Authority. And immediate right to him is Dr. Anthony Nyong, who is the Director of Climate Change and Green Growth at Africa Development Bank. And also right next to him is Dr. Stefan Hammer, who is advisor at the Global Partnership of Strategy in the Climate Change Global Practice of the World Bank Group. And right next to him is Dr. Sejung Kwon, who is the Director General of Climate Change, Energy, Environment, and Scientific Affairs Bureau of the Korean Ministry of Foreign Affairs. So we have a diverse representation in terms of backgrounds and expertise in our panel, so I'm very looking forward to our discussion this morning. So just to set the stage, you will see a screen right behind us, which shows the digital flows of past about 100 years, and you see that the most recent data point is 2014, but the data is already now exerting larger impact on the GDP growth. And if you look into this graph, you see in 15 years before 2014, we didn't even have that data flows, but it's now creating a bigger impact in terms of GDP growth. So when this concept of the fourth industrial revolution came into our discussion era, many people thought that this is just a hype, or there were many economists who were a little bit cynical about what this concept is about. But then after a few years, I think more and more people are putting serious efforts and strong attentions to this topic. And if you look into these data points, then it does make sense that all the policymakers and business leaders are actually putting maybe a proper attention to the theme. And the pace of the change will continue to accelerate. and which will change the way how people interact with each other, how people basically create their livings, and how the society works. This is a graph that shows, that kind of summarizes all the major efforts of multilateral institutions in the science and innovation and technology space. You see, there is a kind of a low gap in the innovation part. So, thus far we've been doing some work in the science and technology space, but the innovation side still has a lot of room to grow. And in the context of Africa, if you look into the landscapes of the technology hubs in Africa, you see it's growing almost on a weekly basis. And if you compare this digital space with other sectors in Africa, you see there is some difference in the way how it's been growing, and it's and the core part of it is that it's been very much locally rooted, and you see all the new apps that comes out in the market in Africa, and I suppose that all the technology hubs could have been one of the contributing factors for that. So while all these technological changes happen on a global level, and at the same time in the region there are significant kind of changes that we see. And so building further on this, I would like to invite Mr. Faustin to maybe share about what Rwandan government has been doing in terms of to leverage these digital technologies in responding to these challenges, and at the same time taking this as an opportunity to build a new growth model, and also what has been going well, and what do you think need to be done further?
Thank you very much, moderator, for giving me this opportunity. As she said, as representative of government, first of all, I would like to thank you for inviting us, and also I want to talk about the responsibility of the government in the harnessing digitalization. The first and foremost is to create a conducive environment in the country which can enable various partners and stakeholders to harness the digitalization. So as far as Rwanda is concerned, Rwanda has developed what we call Smart Rwanda 2020 Master Plan, which was a robust program to digitalize the whole country. To be able to do that, Rwanda has already led over 4,500 kilometers of fiber optic, the whole country, connecting all 30 districts of Rwanda, so that we can connect schools in different corners of the country. We can connect the hospital. We can connect the judicial system. We can connect mostly the local government as well, so that they can be able to shift from to embrace and harness the digitalization. Apart from the fiber optic, also in Rwanda we introduced the 4G internet, which is very fast, so that it can help various stakeholders to in public and private to do their business using the internet. We also focused on mobile penetration, which is now 76%, which is a tremendous achievement, looking from where we started after 1994 genocide, where we started from scratch. So apart from creating that enabling environment through Vision 2020, which is now being translated in another long-term vision, which is Vision 2050. We have a long-term strategy to build a knowledge-based economy. When you're saying a knowledge-based economy, we need to shift from business as usual. We need to build ICT infrastructure. We need to harness innovation. We need to improve young people and promote their innovations. As you said, let me highlight some of things which are working well and others maybe which are still having challenges. What is working well? To be honest with you, looking at the whole government shifting from papers and using the e-procurement, it means a lot. All the public servant, all the private people who are bidding for the tenders, they don't have to waste their time coming to the offices looking for bids and tender documents. They just use the e-procurement system and do their tenders. That's one of the good achievement. Another good achievement, which is really common in Rwanda, it's our judicial system. It was a dream when our Chief Justice said, after 2015, there is no more papers in the courts, all over in different districts of the country. So looking how now all judges have their accounts, all people who want to lodge their claims, they use the system. There is efficiency, but also when I can translate it in terms of climate change, there is emissions we are avoiding, especially in transport. When people is coming from eastern part going to the court in the western part, there is time consuming, there is emission through transport and everything. So that's some of the things which are working well. And then what is not, maybe what needs to be strengthened is the, change is a change. There are some people who have been reluctant to embrace changes, especially when it comes for ICT, young people comes first. But then some people who have been working in the old-fashioned and hard copies system, they have been somehow reluctant to change. But with time and sensitization, people have been seeing that this is the only choice they have for our development in the future. But also the country introduced what we call one laptop per child, so that at least we can start promoting ICT in the young people and children at primary school. So the one laptop per child started 10 years ago, and now government of Rwanda have already distributed around 300,000 laptop in different primary schools in different districts of the country. They are being educated so that they can grow up with that culture of digitalizing. So if I connect it with the climate change then, and how harnessing digitalization can help us in climate change mitigation and climate change adaptation. For instance, in the agriculture sector, our economy, the main driver is the agriculture, and our agriculture is rain-fed agriculture. But looking at the vulnerability of the country, the eastern part is prone to drought, which means that we need to improve the irrigation system. So there are some young people who had the innovations of controlling irrigation using their cell phone mobile. So young people, they said, okay, we have a challenge. We need to irrigate our field, but we don't need to stay there. What can we do? They invented that mobile application, which is controlling the irrigation system. Fortunately, recently I visited Israel, and I found the typical technology, but which is very advanced, where they automated the irrigation, and I saw it is very impressive how a young man from a village can think about that and come up with that solution. So we are now trying to see how we can replicate that and facilitate those people. In terms of emission reduction, we have been using fertilizers. We have been distributing fertilizers all over the country. But we didn't know how much fertilizer have been distributing, how much they have been applied in the field, and how much have been left in the stores. When we have been conducting greenhouse gases inventory, it was very hard with the Ministry of Agriculture to trace fertilizers we used, because they used to tell us, okay, just rely on the imports which are recorded in the books. Then we say no, imports, some are still in the stores. Then one of the young people, they also invented an application which is now being used by all farmers in the country. They apply for fertilizers, and because they did a soil map of the whole country, it can even tells you if you are in the eastern part of the country, you need this type of fertilizers. The soil need this, but not this. But in the previous years, you have been distributing the same type of fertilizer the whole country. And sometimes you give the soil what it doesn't need. So this application is really helping us to be efficient and also reduce the emissions through fertilizers. Good initiatives are so many, even in the transport. We have some young innovators who introduced what we call tap and go. We used to queue and buy tickets and waste time, but now they invented a card where you go and load the money using the internet, then you use the card, you just swipe it on the bus and you go. So this is another innovation which is showing the importance and the rationale of embracing digitalization. I can stop there. Thank you.
Thank you. You've mentioned the applications in the transportation sector, agriculture sector. You did point out there's a challenge in terms of fixing the generation gap, but we could discuss more on that. And Then, Anthony, so what has Africa Development Bank been doing to support, all these efforts of African countries thus far?
Yeah, thank you so very much, everyone. And this is like being put on the spot, but it's a lovely spot because we love hearing these sort of stories that are happening around. I'm a very big optimist concerning climate change. I've always said those who lived 20 years ago, if they saw the televisions of today, they'll wish they hadn't died because they would have not imagined what would have happened over a period of 25 years, how we've moved to where we are in this space. And I believe we talk about 2050, we talk about end of the century, using today's technology, using today's understanding to think how we're going to pick emissions at that spot. There is a whole lot that is going to happen. And some of this we're hearing from people from rural communities on the African continent who are doing things. And so for us at the African Development Bank, we always, let me not say always, we've known and believed that technology has a role to play, not just in climate space, but in Africa's development. We cannot do things the way we did before. The bank president talking about agriculture says it is wickedness in 2018 to find a woman in the village still using machete and hoe and things to punish themselves. We need to move beyond that. And being able to move beyond that meant we need to see what is happening in the space around. We've said it takes Africa, it will take Africa $3 trillion to implement the nationally determined contributions of the African continent. On one hand, do we see this as the market that it ought to be? Or do we see it as a sunk cost? This is money we're going to lose. At the bank, we see it as an opportunity. And these opportunities will come in several aspects, including in the development of technologies. We're seeing a lot of things happening in digital efficiencies. And the bank is keying into this. We're having smart cities. We're trying to turn through our cities program to have smart cities in Africa. We don't have to travel the way our parents traveled. We don't have to go endlessly, not thinking, look at what's happening with Google Maps and all this. These are things that we are investing resources in. We have the Making Finance Work for Africa. Where do we put our money in such that it will work for us? And some of these technological innovations is where we're putting our money in there. Because we believe that going forward, that $35 billion is going to be $3 trillion is going to be true technological innovations. People need to play in that space. We talk about M-Pesa. Even when we assembled the first cell phone, we were already exporting associated technologies through the M-Pesa money scheme. People were sitting down to think. And when you look at it, the African Development Bank has a hand in it through the Making Finance Work for Africa. We put in quite a lot of resources to ensure that that initiative works. For technology, I like my colleague's presentation. Technology does not exist in a vacuum. It doesn't. It's culturally, sociologically, politically driven. The fact that it works in somewhere does not necessarily mean it's going to work in Africa. We've seen the Green Revolution. It worked in Asia, lovely. It worked in Latin America, but when it came to Africa, it failed because we carried the same technology and felt if it worked in Asia, it must work in Africa. It didn't. It failed because we did not learn the very first lesson in this adoption. So what we're doing is we're putting in quite a lot of resources in creating the enabling environment for investors. And these investors, be they technological, be they whatever they are, without the proper enabling environment, it cannot happen. And so for us, we have a few things I want to touch on. For instance, we have a program called the Technology for Africa's Agricultural Transformation. It's a major program in the bank. And what is it? Because we want to transform our agriculture. And part of what is talking about the apps, we want to attract young people in agriculture. And they're saying, look, we are not farmers. Don't call me a farmer. I'm an agripreneur. I'm a smart fellow. So he sits in his office. Some of them are copying the president of the bank with bow ties, and sit in the office and design these apps and are consulting for all the farmers out there, telling them what to do. We're investing in this through the TAT program, the Technology for Africa's Agricultural Transformation. We need to do this. Then also we have, when you move away from that, we are working on adoption. What are the barriers that stop the adoption of these technologies? It works in Rwanda. Can we move it to Burundi? Can we help you to scale it across to Nigeria? Those are the initiatives we are seriously working on. But then we also know that these technologies rely on data, availability of efficient data, good data. If we don't have good climate information, there is absolutely no way we're going to have apps that work. So we're putting in quite a lot of resources to strengthen Africa's meteorological centers. We've put in about $50 million to increase the capacities of Africa's regional climate centers. And we're now extending them to the national Met services. Because if they do not have this data, it will not work. We've seen, for those of us who come from that background, we realize that there are several satellites in space, but the one that works best for Morocco might not be the one that works best for Burundi. So we are in that space to see how our regional centers could be the ones to provide that necessary work we have. We're talking about smart satellites. We're working with EUMETSAT to strengthen the capacities of these African countries because we realize it is extremely very important for that. And then let me end by saying, we look at satellites today, we look at drones. Who would have thought a few years ago that we're going to have drones in your face, in everything that you can do, collecting information? And several young colleagues are into this space, working on it. And whatever we know today on climate vulnerability largely came through satellite technologies. How are Africans playing in this space? Several African countries have launched satellites in space. It's important. Knowledge is power. It's unfair for many of us to rely on external sources of information. So we are supporting some of these countries, like in Nigeria, that's the space program. We're supporting that, and we're doing quite a lot trying to extend this to other regions. Next year, we're doing something that is, we think is very important. Next, we want to bring, we've seen all this array of smart agripreneurs, smart technology developers on the African continent. Many of them are playing in their small space. Next year, the African Development Bank plans to bring most of these people together, link them up with investors. How can the bank then put seed money into this to scale up these initiatives? It is important that we provide the support that they need. Many of these people are looking for support from outside because they can't get it from inside. We are determined to get that support for them inside, because whatever we will succeed in doing to address issues of climate change, take advantage of the efficiencies that come in there, would have to come largely from inside. So the African Development Bank is taking advantage of this. Finally, we're also mindful of the fact that we need to also sound some warning, some caution. When we improve efficiency, the cost of production goes down. There's efficiency gains to be made in the oil industry. How do we safeguard the fact that this efficiency reduction does not make it so difficult to do other things like solar, wind, geothermal, and so on, because oil now has become very cheap because of the higher gains. So we need to balance both and see that while we're thinking about digital efficiency, we need to also think about what is best interest for a continent like Africa. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Obviously covered various things, but then I would like to invite Dr. Stephen to share, given that World Bank is operating on a kind of global, worldwide level, we'd like to learn more about what kind of discussions are going on at a high level, and how the World Bank is trying to implement those on the concrete settings in the ground.
Great, thank you. Is this on? Very good. Well, thank you. Good morning, everybody, and thank you to the African Development Bank. This is a great topic, great event. It really resonates a lot with where the bank's thinking as we try and look down the road and anticipate what are the changes in markets and technology that will influence our ability to deliver on our twin goals of eliminating extreme poverty and promoting shared prosperity. We have an initiative known as the Disruptive Technologies Initiative, and it's actually run right out of the President's office. That's how comprehensive it goes across the entire institution. We had a paper that was presented to our board just 3 months ago called Disruptive Technologies in the World Bank Group, which outlines our approach and how we're thinking about this subject. And we've tried to explore how it will affect different types of clients and the way that disruption can bring both opportunities and as Anthony noted well, some risks. And so we have to be very strategic in terms of how we think about using these disruptions to our advantage. To help countries benefit from what we characterize as a technology and digital revolution, the paper proposed and our board of directors endorsed what we call a build, boost, and broker approach that gives countries access to the most relevant innovation and the capacity to deploy it for its greatest impact. I'm going to give you a few examples that illuminate really the breadth of how we're thinking about this. Some of these are projects that actually have been implemented and already seen successes. Others are just getting off the ground. And I'll circle back for what that implies in terms of how we're moving forward. So one area that we're very focused on is the use of big data. It's a topic that you can probably find at least a dozen or more topics, side events here at the COP on this week alone. But we're talking about big data as it relates to analyzing and disseminating information on renewable technologies and renewable resources. And so we've launched what we call the Global Wind Atlas, which uses the latest digital technologies to provide a comprehensive mapping of wind power resources around the world. Now, for those of you who are in the energy sector, you know that particularly when you're placing a wind turbine, it's all about the wind that's there. It can't be something that's 1 kilometer or 2 kilometers away. And so what we've done is we basically have started at a larger grid scale, but then we use some microscale modeling approaches to bring it down so that we have wind conditions approximately every 1,000 meters at 3 different elevations, 50 meters, 100 meters, and 200 meters. And this is the first such wind atlas of its type, and it couldn't have been done if there weren't these digital monitoring technologies and the ability to share and manipulate this information from multiple different sources. Information is made available for free online to help both policymakers and investors assess the regions that have the greatest wind potential. Another area that we've actually done work on the ground is to use some micro-sensing technologies to try and identify energy efficiency opportunities. So in Bangladesh, the textile industry is quite large, and there are over 10 million spindles in use today in the country. And that number is growing at approximately 20% per year. So working with the government and having some consultants go in and install some microsensing technology at the company scale, we've been able to assess what are the efficiency opportunities in this industry. And that information is then aggregated centrally, and we're able to understand how different types of technologies operating under different conditions can operate more or less efficiently. And the study found that it was with relatively simple changes you could achieve a 5 to 20% efficiency improvement in this sector. Well, given that this is a large industry, a fast-growing industry in the country, this has huge implications in terms of their profitability, but also obviously total energy needs in different parts of the country and across the entire country. Another area that we're using blockchain technology, and this is something that we have a working group within the bank that's very focused on blockchain. And we have a couple of different applications within the climate change group where we're exploring how to deploy this. So the World Bank's Biocarbon Fund is launching a pilot to use blockchain in selected countries to help slow the rate of deforestation. And it does so by looking at how the markets are structured and who is generating the forest products, where they are they linked to formal value chains, cooperatives, or other large agribusiness off-takers? And whether, if they're linked to those type of larger systems, then the products are more traceable. But if they're not, then those products are less traceable as to the source. And so it's hard to understand whether that end product is actually linked to any deforestation of any kind. So the pilot will identify commodities whose value chains are linked to deforestation in different countries, and where the first point of produce aggregation can be identified at a very specific geographic scale. Satellite data will then be used to score the level of deforestation in real time, and then blockchain technology, ledger technology, will be used to track the commodity as it works its way up the value chain, even as it begins to get processed and mixed with other produce. So if the pilot can identify a means of establishing this traceability, then we think it can have a significant impact in terms of influencing behavior on the ground, in terms of minimizing the level of deforestation. Another one that I want to talk about relates to a paper we wrote earlier this year, a report called Blockchain and Emerging Digital Technologies for Enhancing Post-2020 Climate Markets. So this, in many ways, it links to the Article 6 discussions that are underway here. Trying to figure out how this new approach can possibly link to the creation of new financing mechanisms that can satisfy or help support the creation of these new tradable commodities. So that's a report. It's hypothetical. We're looking at how this can enter into the conversations. One of the things it really speaks to is how the markets or how the rules are being written. And if they're being written narrowly, it may constrain the application of certain technologies. If they're being written broadly, it may open up opportunities for entrepreneurs to come in and move this conversation in different directions. And so in that case, I think it speaks well to to Anthony's point about this notion of the enabling environment. And I'm going to close with one final example. And this is not in a developing country context, but it is something that we are paying attention to because it does affect larger issues of how markets are structured and regulated. So in both Singapore and in New York City, there have been some pilots done with the use of distributed energy technologies and the creation of virtual microgrids. For those of you who aren't familiar with the technology, a microgrid is a small-scale energy system that can accommodate renewables, CHP systems, highly efficient combined heat and power systems, et cetera. And they offer the opportunity to potentially allow you to generate renewable energy on your house, but if I'm in a building where the rooftop won't support the installation of solar panels, or I'm in an area where there are lots of large trees that affects the level of sun that my house would receive, then I might be able to buy some of the energy that you're generating. Well, these markets, for them to succeed, the energy regulatory market has to actually accommodate that type of transaction as well. And so coming back to the enabling environment example, if the energy regulators are not paying attention to these types of advances and they're not thinking about how the energy regulatory system might need to become more flexible in the future, because it was certainly built around the model that was created 100 years ago. But will that same type of regulatory system survive today or support today, and all these digital advances that we're seeing? So again, those highlight a lot of the different issues that we're seeing technology deployed on the ground. We're hypothesizing about where markets may go, where some of these technologies can go. We're embracing it at the highest levels, having conversations on a regular basis. Every few weeks, we have meetings from representatives across the bank to learn more about the use of the technology, to bring outside experts in to teach us where there may be opportunities. And that's really to generate some brainstorming at the staff level about how we may be able to think to effectively deploy this across the world. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Steve, for sharing what the World Bank is doing. With all these public sector institutions putting all these efforts, we also want to learn how the private sector has been responding. And Alexis, can you share how you developed your own business model with Alco Group? And you've been in the space for 10 years now. And what kind of changes have you been seeing?
Thank you. We've been, Alcott is one of the veteran company in the CDM space, essentially. We've been active since 2009, so we saw a lot of change in the business in general. So just to put things into background, CDM exists since 2001, so it's a very young industry. And at the parallel, we also had an incredible exponential growth in tech development. CDM has more or less 280 methodology developed and registered today. So those methodologies evolve. And for us to do project on the ground, it's not only a methodology, but it's a real action that takes place. And what Paris delivered to us beyond the Paris Agreement is also the SDG, which we acknowledge and recognize as a second breath for the carbon project, where before additionality used to be questionable and was essentially the appreciation of a verificator, a third party, a DOE. Today, the SDGs give us the possibility to have very tangible additionality factors, and that's where the technology came in. So what we've been doing with the pilot project we have in Senegal, which is a mangrove representation, is to integrate crypto as an element of verification that can basically track the SDGs that we are including in the project design document, with the ambition that at a later stage this technology will be recognized and will allow projects whether it's forestry or renewable energy. We've been hearing about smart grid and applications that are being deployed in Africa. So we think that the peer-to-peer on a crypto basis is the way onward. It will allow to reduce cost. It will allow real-time verification or validation. It will ensure integrity of the market, transparency, and therefore efficiency and robustness. And it can be linked with other technologies such as drone, which we mentioned, which will allow then for the market to have access to those emission reduction directly, and that can be tokenized.
So, Mr. Hoser, would you like to maybe add more on your business partners' comments, or maybe if you have a presentation?
Yeah.
I think it's a high time to do that now.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Is the presentation? Okay.
Do you want to stand or?
Yeah, I understand. Thank you so much for the invitation. And I want to thank the opportunity. Also, thank you for the World Bank, because for the post-2020 report to implementation of the distributed ledger technologies, they have validated all of philosophy or hypotheses. We know that we are working in the right direction. I'm going to tell you our story and evolution. We work with Alcott Group, and we have an agreement to collaboratively sign and to promote the use of blockchain technology in the face of carbon market challenge, such as double accounting, transparency, trust, and scalability. Alcott is a leader in tools on strategies. And well, tell me, the past year we created the Climate Coin C2 token, the first carbon neutral crypto asset in the world. The token is the cryptographic equivalent of carbon credit. We were invited to be founding partner of the Climate Change Coalition with Masamba Tioye from UNFCCC, with the aim of getting involved in the development of pilots to test the powerful distributed ledger technology. From the beginning, we want to climate coin to fit into the real economy and solve problems. It is more than a cryptocurrency. Yes, when the Bitcoin of the climate change is not good for us. After more months of analysis, we come up with several conclusions. The Climate Coin C2 token can be the crypto asset, payment currency, the method of pay needed by the decentralized carbon markets. But to achieve this, we also have to create our platform, our own decentralized carbon market. It's the climate trade. And also we did developing the climate trade, which is in the testing phase was in September with the support of Alcom and Alexis. Our mission is to create a disruptive financial ecosystem that allows polluters to compensate their offset by buying certificate carbon credits for Alcott, and it's an example, and drive funds and investments toward projects in compliance with the Sustainable Development Goals, the microclimate bonds, the crowd equity opportunities to financial the technology. We are building a decentralized carbon credits market to the climate trade on blockchain technology, which enables individuals and citizens. It's a good opportunity to the impact investors, corporations and governments with blockchain as a service method of collaboration with all the governments, white label technology. To their trading operation offsets, efficient and without intermediaries. This is a good point. Alexis can explain better than me the dark strategies for the past market, the intermediaries and the cuts in the budgets. Well, the problem and the carbon market an unresolved situation. Well, we have different climate markets trade different units assets, no? Well, have difference in structure and governance and rely on separate centralized registers. The monitoring, reporting and verification practice still involve manual process that rely on disconnected data trails, spreadsheets and static PDFs and send emails. It's human mistakes. The variation of value of the carbon credits are dependent on many factors, such as scope of the schemes, coverage, specific rules and scheme boundaries, the suite of policies and measures within which the schemes operates, the jurisdiction's particular circumstances, capacity or ambition. More countries have ratified the Paris Agreement. These countries have indices to limit or reduce their emissions through a variety of measures. Article 6 of the agreement recognizes that governments can participate in cooperative approach. African Development Bank is a good example already. And the possibility of different approach to promote greater ambition and sustainable development. According to various reports from the United Nations and World Bank, the implementation of the agreement requires large-scale investments and governments at all levels to respond with combinations of regulatory mandates, incentives and solutions. This growing diversity in the type, design and scope of the schemes does not promote economic efficiency, and neither the effective application of available financial resources. The different markets exchange different types of units, crypto assets, maybe is the future, have difference in structure and governments with the smart contracts. We can design the smart contracts and records in separate decentralized countries. To facilitate the larger, more liquid and resilient trade in the heterogeneous climate markets, a new architecture is needed like blockchain, big data, Internet of Things, smart contracts, smart meterings, and other disruptive technologies such as artificial intelligence or virtual reality, augmented reality. A new technology era that is in rapid evolution presents opportunities for the efficient and robust design and development of this next generation of climate markets. Our solution, the climate trade and climate coincident token and the climate trade. Well, world all flags, more flags. Imagine that each country has different types of credits, each one worth a price and can have different qualities. If we add to this that we are different currencies, we obtain a complexity that we solve with the climate coincident token. By entering in the climate trade platform, the mitigation, the example, the mitigation project developers change their credits for CO2 tokens. A process also available for the companies, for the buyers that want to buy credits, change their currencies for CO2 tokens. This simplifies transactions greatly and finally allows a very valuable quality in the market that is fungible. This is an example. The buyer issues, maybe Correos is the postal big company in Spain. The buyer issues a purchase order to a seller and pay these credits in euros to a seller, Alcott, in Mexico, for example, in pesos mexicanos. The buyer receives their certificate and can cancel, bank the credit and be carbon neutral or save them for the future. The mitigation projects developer uploads his UNFCCC, VCS, or gold standard credits. The seller receives a sale order and deposits the standard certificates for verification. Maybe it's the next question. No? The value proposition of the blockchain is the distributed database, peer-to-peer transaction, transparency, computational logic, the cost, and the is very important, bringing the corruption, and irreversibility of records. This is very important. All transaction is entered in a database, and the accounts are updated. The records cannot be altered because they aren't linked to every transaction record that come before them. And the speed. This is the value proposition. The climate trade is a central hub and the all-in-one trading platform designed to harness the power of the CO2 token. We are the Airbnb of the carbon markets. It's a good example of TripAdvisor. First, we are a marketplace, but in the next years, maybe we are eBay of the carbon markets. And thank you so much. Yes.
Well, thank you. I mean, I guess this is still very much in a piloting stage right now, right? So I wish you a great success. We have one last speaker who could shed more lights on, from the donor government side, like what kind of efforts the government has been putting into, and why digital now?
Thank you, Jean, for inviting me here and giving me the opportunity to speak in this session. Yesterday, I watched the IPCC report. I remember the three messages that is, every bit of warming matters, every year matters, and every choice matters. So we can choose any option, but we should be responsible for any option which we have taken. But now, what kind of option we should take? In the sense, I think we should not neglect the importance of digital technology. That is, I think, why we are here today. And the another message is that the one goal, climate change goal, should be hand in hand with other goals. So that means climate change goals should be go hand in hand with SDGs and other goals, global goals. But how can we cement? How can we have synergy among these goals? I think technology can have a role to play. And the African countries like Rwanda is very interesting and impressive story. When I was in university, I remember I watched with compassion the movie, The Hotel Rwanda. It was a very tragic story, but now, currently, Rwanda is an amazing story of development, a successful story of development. And then now, the Rwanda is pursuing the policies of the fiber optic and 4G internet and mobile penetration, and also they considering a long-term strategy towards 2050. That means they're gonna form a ICT ecosystem. That means they're ready for accepting the new technology like blockchain technology. So I think they are ready. Already smart farming and e-learning and smart cities all together. We need another new approach. That sometimes it can be business as unusual approach. That is very important for us. And so now we should turn to what characteristics of new technologies. But then I can name some characteristics, attributes. That is decentralization and transparency and accountability, and also equity issues. The equity issues are very important, because even if now certain countries less developed, they can be more advanced in digital technologies. They can be applying the new technologies. They can develop their society, and also reducing poverty, and also the reducing greenhouse gas emissions. But how we can enhance aid effectiveness and also digital efficiency. In a sense, I should be more focused on the traceability and the econs related to the aid effectiveness. One example in Korea, my friend, he had a business, is a flower delivery, but in the first place, we don't know. I wondered whether the money I gave to him can be appropriately spent. But after some months later, he showed me a picture taken when the goods I've ordered be delivered to the recipients. And then now they developed applications in the internet, and now we can use blockchain. It will be clear for my eliminating my doubts. So, in a sense that it means for traceability and accountability is the core attribute of digital technology. It can be enhance the problems of dilemma from donor to recipient. That they can solve the doubt, sort of some suspicions, but they can be more clear that by automated tracking system, automated reporting, that kind of technologies can solve these kind of problems. And but for the operationalization of these technologies, we should think about some aspects. One is the data collection. We should, as the moderator Jean said, the digital flow is greater than the trade and finance. So how to assure the quality of data, and then how to design the market. How can we regulate or deregulate, and then how to give some incentive mechanism to engage many stakeholders in general public and city governors and NGOs together. And also we should be more focused on standardization. That is, but these issues cannot be solved on one party. We need collaborations among many stakeholders, parties, non-parties together. So I think today's session is the starting point, is the only, opened the gates of another world. So we should be together to do two more vivid discussions, how to get together to be, have to have synergy effects among our global goals, hand in hand the way developed and developing countries together. Thank you.
Thank you. So our guests in the audience have waited for very long for questions. Is there anyone who would like to pose questions? We have a gentleman back there.
Thank you very much. My name is Gareth Phillips. I work for the African Development Bank. Tony made a point about how you could use this technology to increase efficiency in the oil and gas industry. But I mean, we know as well, digital technology and marketplaces, Airbnb and so on. I mean, these things all act to increase demand and make it easier for us to shop and to consume. There's an explosion in fast fashion, and generally this technology, it has huge opportunities, but I mean, it brings much greater problems than just improving efficiency. It increases the amount that we consume, or it makes it easier for us to consume more packaging, more plastics, more energy in the production process. Do we need to sort of take some responsibility for how this technology develops and where it pushes society in the future? I mean, the progress in Rwanda is fantastic. And with this, you're going to create lots of commerce and demand, but your greenhouse gas emissions are going to go up as well, because there's going to be more energy consumed in producing things, more transport, and so on. If we don't take care, what are your suggestions as to how we control the way that this technology develops and the way society pushes, or is it too late? Is the genie already out of the bottle?
Thank you. Is there any other questions? No. I think I've seen on the our live stream page there was a question about how it's very a general question, but how these new technologies can improve and create changes in the value chain of agriculture. That was the question, but I think we've maybe covered that part while we were discussing. So our panelists, would you like to respond to that question?
Thank you very much. Let me first respond to the question of our colleague who is in the room. Yeah, it's true that the digitalization and embracing ICT will need to increase the demand, but it has other challenges and effects. Maybe one of other challenge which I didn't even mention, from the environmental perspective, we are likely to face a serious challenge of electronic waste in various rural areas. We saw it when we started distributing laptop for children and everything. So it is the role of the government and other key partners, while they are bringing solutions, ICT infrastructure solution, also to think about solving those challenges. For instance, in Rwanda, we established a waste handling facility, which is one of the biggest in the Eastern Africa, as far as I know. It is one, collecting all the electronic waste in different corners of the country. The second, they are doing refurbishing of laptops and other ICT equipment, bring them back on the market, which is recycling and circular economy we are promoting. And also, apart from refurbishing, they are also putting apart hazardous waste which are contained in those equipment. So that's on one hand. But to be able to achieve that, we need first of all, as governments and key partners, to come forward and venture in those type of solutions. On another hand, we are talking about improving efficiency, but it has also another effect. When we are not being careful about cybersecurity, everything is gone. You can just sit here and do your business, embrace technology, embrace ICT, and another person sit in another corner of the world, just steal what you are doing, destroy what you are doing, if you don't also reinforce your cybersecurity. So we need, as you said, we need to make sure that while we are embracing the technology, we need also to be sure and be mindful about the challenges. When it comes for the emissions, yes, we want technology, but we want green technology. You can use irrigation using the pumps which are using generators. But why can't you shift to solar panels which are using less energy, but also which are emitting less? So it's all about changing mindset. It's all about embracing green, moving from technology, but to go to green technology. Thank you.
Thanks. Maybe let me just quickly add that. I started by saying that technology does not exist in a vacuum. You grow into technologies. We're seeing potential danger on the African continent. serious harm. One, we have a desire to have distributed energy, solar batteries, solar panels all over. No single African country has a battery buyback policy. We are going to be faced with millions and millions and millions of dead batteries all over the place. We don't have standard factories where these batteries are recycled. What do we see? The kids, again, who are not privileged to go to school, are going to be recruited in the informal sector to break these batteries and take out the lead and sell them. And I hope we're not going to see an explosion of lead poisoning all over because we're trying to solve one problem. So, where are we on this plan to make sure that our technologies do not really cause us that much harm? Nobody talks about what it takes to produce a solar panel. How environmentally friendly is it? So I think we need to step back a little bit and ask ourselves as a continent, where are we on this space? Are we ready for this at this point? Solar panels have a definite lifespan. They don't last forever. And we are getting to the first set of expiration of those sets of solar panels that came before. What do we do with them? So I think it is important that the enabling environment needs to be put. I like your country. You say, look, I want to ban the importation of used clothing that is just a bearing ground for clothes that have expired. People don't use them anymore. Can we have the same thing for other technologies and say, look, we're not just talking about banning cars who are 10, 15 years old or something, but we actually have a definite policy that says when you bring in batteries, when those batteries die, you have to buy them back from the owners and take them to a recycling facility. Do we have a policy that talks to us about what do we do with our solar panels when they die? I'll give you a shocking story. I went to a testing center, and the fellow there put 2 solar panels in front of me and said, Anthony, could you check these 2 panels and see what's happening? And I checked. I told him nothing, everything looks good. He said, okay, watch what happens. He puts them through his infrared machines and sees that one is completely cut into pieces, 3% efficiency. The other one is normal. He says this is what is coming to most of your countries in your continent because people don't check. They don't know the difference. And I picked this as one of them that was shipped over to you guys. This is 3% efficiency. Dead. You don't know when it was manufactured. You don't know what it is. I think, to me, that enabling environment is very important. That we create the right institutions, the standard organizations, all those ones that we've put to check to make sure that they do the right thing so we don't become another dumping ground for obsolete technologies. Thank you.
I was wondering, in response to that question, I'm aware that there are cases of approaches of nudge in terms of new technology adoption and leveraging all this behavior science approaches. When new technology gets adopted, it's not just technology, but it involves a lot of other changes as well. And can any of our speakers aware of those new solutions or cases? Maybe you could dig some cases and then share it over our Facebook or other channels. But I'm aware that there are, for example, these behavioral insights labs that kind of supports to mitigate these kind of negative risks and effects of new technology adoptions. So we will do more research on this and then share it with you all through our social medias. If there's no other questions, I think we could wrap our discussions here. Well, thank you for your time and your attendance here today, this morning. I know 9 a.m. session is usually very challenging in COP, but our room is well attended, I think, and we have many other people, watching us from distance. So thank you. And we look forward to seeing more progress in this topic in our development industry. Thank you.
Monica says 11. I think that to be in the MDB pavilion.
Okay.
Okay, so we'll make that. Cheers. Thanks. I'd like to know more.